where Beto O'Rourke could hear directly from his constituents. In Congress, he successfully enacted laws that improved access to health care for veterans. He added urgent mental health resources for service members and permanently protected thousands of acres of natural land. As a leading voice on immigration and a lifelong advocate for the United States-Mexico border, Beto organized a 2,000-person Father Day March to Tornillo to raise awareness of family separation. He will continue returning to the camp until all of the children were successfully released. In March of 2017, Beto launched a historic 19-month campaign to represent all 28 million Texans in the U.S. Senate. Running the largest grassroots campaign the state of Texas has ever seen, he rejected all money from political action committees and personally visited each one of the 254 counties of Texas as he held over 350 town hall discussions for the first-time voters to go to the polls. Beto is married to Amy, and they are raising their 3 children, Ulysses, Molly, and Henry, in El Paso. So we look forward to hearing from presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke, who will be joining us just in a few minutes. I want to introduce you quickly to one of our national co-chairs, Queen Mother Mashariki Jawanza. Peace and blessings, Queen Mother.
Peace and blessings, Brother Jabbar, and thank you so much for doing this.
We are very excited to have you on. Could you share one thing about NCOBRA? It's a very culturally based organization. Can you share that the co-chairs have both a male and a female, and the reason why that is?
We believe in balance. And so most of our commissions, as well as, of course, our national co-chairs, we have the male and we have the female. Which gives us a balance and equity. And that's what we are primarily about, have been about for the past 30 years.
Wonderful, thank you. And also joining us, who's going to share her essay, one of our NCOBRA youth members. You want to share your name, young lady?
My name is Azali Fortier.
Wonderful. And so thank you so much for being on. And we were excited to read your essay and declare you the winner of the essay contest. So at this time, feel free to share what you wrote, or some of what you wrote.
I wrote an essay called Reparations Now, 400 Years of Terror. Unkept Promises. As slavery was coming to an end, we, African Americans, were promised 40 acres and a mule as a form of reparations from the president and the government of the United States. This promise was made official on January 16, 1865. Of course, we were happy until we knew it was an empty promise. After all the work we had done, all the back-breaking work, after all of our efforts. But of course, at this time, we were not stable enough to do something about it. And even though it took 400 years, we are ready. So now we must get up, stand up, and say reparations now. I say yes to reparations. You may be wondering why I have such a strong opinion on this subject. Well, as a people, it is our responsibility to fight for our rights, our families, and ourselves. Since the world still has a debt that has yet to be paid, we must fight for it. By fighting for it, we will be fighting for ourselves, our families, our rights, and our future. So you might be wondering, well, what you must be paid for if African Americans are thriving in the world? Well, my answer to you is, and I don't say this in any disrespectful way, but you must be blind, or the world doesn't care, so it just sweeps it under the rug. And the answer is both, because you have been trained only to see the bad stereotype-based things about Black people because a lot of people cover it up. Reasons for reparations. Now you must be like, we get your point, reparations now. Well, I'm saying I'm going to make sure you're getting the point. It's a right. We are still being hurt, and white supremacy is still going on. White people have the power and money. They have continued to break their promises, and they have continued to cover it up. They are thinking several years ahead, and they have us African American people so brainwashed that we can't even see it. It's not right. Not only do they owe us from slavery and segregation, they owe us now for the trauma and the pain, the hurt they say we don't feel because we are not human. Well, they are obviously not human because they treat us the same ways. They are just hiding it better and better. It's not right. They keep holding us back and killing the Black population. And as we are getting killed one by one, the world is watching and they see. But their hearts are so dead that when they see they're killing people, they watch not in fear, but in hope that one day whites will rise to power and African Americans will be inferior once and for all. Well, I say that dream of theirs has to die. But the first step is getting our reparations and getting our fair share. Because we built this country. We worked, bled, and died on the land where we are today. Let's make our ancestors proud and get what we are owed. How would you feel? Now imagine you're a slave and you were promised some justice. And it's been 400 years since slavery ended, but you still haven't got it paid or an apology for the years that you have been forced to work. You can't cross over because your life's mission has not been completed. So you spend 400 years waiting to get your reparations and for your people to stand up for themselves, wondering how much longer you will have to wait. Well, I just have one question. How would you feel? I know I would be annoyed and ready to start a war. We must finish the unfinished business so that these ghosts can finally rest in peace. I hope. I hope you have enjoyed, and the most importantly, learned something from this essay. My name is Azali Fortier. My name means great kindness. So let's do something kind and vote out Trump. Kick white supremacy out and get what belongs to us. Let's make things right. Let's live our best lives. Let's help our ancestors rest in peace. Let's do all of these things because I hope for a better world where we can all live in peace. I hope we can finally come together and do what we must do. One day, I hope one day, I can look back over my history and say the world was always against us, and yet we always came together to defeat the world. I hope that as you're reading this and you're getting ready to help my dream, you're getting ready to help my dreams become a reality. Thank you. Thank you. Hi.
Can you hear me? Peace and blessings.
Hey.
Peace and blessings. We got presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke on the line. We are very excited here. I give you a lot of commendations for coming in and talking about a very difficult subject. And so welcome to the Youth Summit.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And I tuned in just to catch the last part of the essay that was just read, I believe by Zali. I may be mispronouncing the name, but found what I heard to be very powerful, and grateful that I got to listen, and very grateful to you for the invitation to be here. So very, very much looking forward to it.
Excellent. We're going to jump right into our first question. We appreciate you taking these questions. It says, there are many different perspectives about what is owed and how we should go about awarding reparations. As president, what process would you put in place to bring reparations for descendants of enslaved Africans in the United States into reality?
I think the best possible path begins with bringing every American onto the same page of knowledge and the same page of our history, to understand this country's foundation, not at the 4th of July, 1776, but the 20th of August, 1619. And to understand that the outcomes that we see today, 10 times the wealth in white America than there is in black America, or a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for women of color than it is for white women, or in Texas, and this may be true in other parts of the country, but a 5-year-old child in a kindergarten classroom is 5 times as likely to be suspended or expelled if he or she is a child of color than is a white child for the same infraction in front of the same teacher in the same school. A schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline, in other words, it begins in kindergarten when that child is absolutely defenseless against this system. When we think about the fact that racism has been institutionalized, that white supremacy is not just a specter from the past or something we might have to be afraid of in the future, but is as alive and well in America today as perhaps it ever was, then I think it is very necessary that all of us in America, especially people who look like me, listen to those who have borne the brunt of this racism in every part of their lives, and understand that the wealth, the success, the greatness of America was built on the backs of those who had no choice but to do it, and whose descendants still are not able to fully participate in this country's economy, in our democracy, in life in America today. So Sheila Jackson Lee, my former colleague in the House who represents Houston in the Congress, has introduced a bill, I think previously introduced by John Conyers, that would begin this process of reparations by bringing to the table the country, and importantly, those who have faced the consequences of this racism through Jim Crow and segregation and suppression, and the consequences and legacy of slavery, to make sure that we all come up to the same page, and then address repairing the injustice, and then committing to not committing this same injustice on future generations. So as president, I would gratefully sign that legislation into law, participate as fully as I could in listening to my fellow Americans on this issue, and not allowing that to prevent us from doing some of the things that we need to do now, address school segregation that is as bad or worse today than it was in 1954 on the eve of Brown versus Board, and commit spending more than $20 billion a year on minorities serving school districts and schools, address a teacher gap right now. We know that disparity in discipline is not just a matter of equality, but of equity. And if we are hiring and retaining more teachers who look like their students, we're going to see better outcomes. And I'll make sure that we have that teacher pipeline and commit $500 million a year to investing in HBCUs and MSIs that will produce those teachers that we need in our classrooms. That maternal mortality crisis, invest not just in universal health care, but in home health care for Black women in this country. And that means midwives and doulas, and those who can address not just maternal mortality, but infant mortality that's greater today between Black America and white America than it was in 1850. Getting more capital out into the community. Black women are starting and growing businesses at 14 times the rate of the rest of this country right now. So that is economic growth and job creation if I've ever seen it. Let's make sure that more capital is made available, especially after a history of redlining in America. And in fact, not just a history, it is alive and well in America today. So our administration would double the size of community development finance institutions that can deploy capital to those who are creating and growing businesses today in America. So all of those things can happen at the same time that we sign into law that reparations bill and ensure that this country has a conversation that for 400 years we have not had, that must happen now if we're going to make progress on any of these issues.
Thank you for that detailed answer. Follow-up question is, as a politician, you know political promises are not always kept. What about your past track record tells a voter that you are serious about making reparations a reality?
It's a good question. I think part of it is in the answer I just gave you. The things that I just said, I'm saying all across America. And I'm saying those in all white audiences, in communities like in Iowa, where African Americans constitute 3% of the population in that state. But it's very important to the point that we were just discussing, that we don't just say what is important to those when it's convenient. We say it especially when it is difficult. And I've been talking about this reparations bill and the need to make progress on these issues everywhere in America. Talking about gun violence, for example, in one of the reddest states, one of the proudest gun-owning states in the country, Texas, and doing it in every community, no matter how red or how blue, how big or how small, and talking about gun violence, not just in those sensational mass shootings, including at schools, although we're talking about that because it's important, but talking about the day-to-day, day-in, day-out in many communities that literally never makes the headlines, whose names are never heard, where attention is never paid, and elevating their stories and investing in violence reduction and intervention before the first shots are fired, and then in investing in the care for those who have lived through trauma in their communities, in their neighborhoods, and in their lives. So my track record as a candidate, my track record as a member of Congress addressing these issues, my track record on the El Paso City Council, where I stood up to the police union and voted against the police contract because I thought that there was impunity and a lack of accountability in terms of how force is used and against whom force is used. When you have far too many African Americans in my community of El Paso, Mexican Americans, unarmed, being shot and killed by police officers. So it wasn't just me talking about it, it was me voting that way and against popular opinion and the rest of my colleagues on city council, because it's just the right thing to do. And I'm gonna make sure that I always do the right thing.
Beto O'Rourke, man, we greatly appreciate your time. I was committed to your staff. You were very intent. He told me 10 minutes that they were going to be strict on it. We're right at 7. But we have college students, HBCU students from Alabama, Louisiana. I don't know how well you're doing in Alabama. There's a lot of them from Alabama on the line. What would you have to say to these college students now that are first-time voters, that are looking to you for some wisdom and some guidance, particularly on reparations? In this last minute or two, what would your closing words be to these college students?
I want to tell you that I'm looking to you. And that's why I've traveled and spent time at so many HBCUs across this country. To be able to give the commencement address at Paul Quinn College at the end of the last semester, one of the highest honors of my life. To go to North Carolina A&T and be in a place that really was fundamental to launching a civil rights revolution in this country, where 4 students on February 1st of 1960 went to that Woolworths, ordered coffee, and began the process by which they would integrate not just at lunch counter, but help to integrate all places of public accommodation in America. Really thanks to them and other young people, many from HBCUs, that we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. As a Texan, sometimes we're tempted to give Lyndon Baines Johnson the credit. He really did what this country forced him to do. And those young people who shocked the conscience of America are the ones who made it possible. And so in that spirit, I see those who are fighting for climate justice right now. I see Black Lives Matter. I see those who are fighting for dreamers to be able to live without fear of deportation back to a country that they do not know, whose language they do not speak, because they want them to be US citizens here in this country, in the strongest, in the best traditions of service and sacrifice. And so I want you to know that I am inspired, that I will continue to follow your lead, I'll continue to show up, I'll continue to listen and to learn. And I'm grateful to every one of you who I've met along the way, who's given me a chance to be there and to be part of the conversation. So very grateful, very inspired. Want to do everything that I can to support the leadership that you are showing. So thank you very much.
Mr. Beto O'Rourke, we greatly appreciate you coming on, wishing you great luck and success in your presidential candidate run, and Lord willing, we'll be seeing each other again. Wishing you the best.
Hope so. Let's make it a point. Thank
Absolutely.
you very much. Thanks for having me out.
You're welcome.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Be well.
All right, so we heard from presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke. I don't know how much better it gets than that for our young people to see people at the highest office, running for the highest office in the country, talking to you directly. That's how important you are. That's how significant you are. That's how incredible and amazing you are, how much ability you have to affect change. And so we're going to go back to our co-chair, Queen Mother Mashariki. And I say Queen Mother, can you give us, I know that's a cultural thing, but give us a little understanding. Put some respect on her name. Put some respect on it. Why did they call you Queen Mother Mashariki?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was actually initiated in Ghana, West Africa, as a Queen Mother. In the Volta region, Tefle traditional area. Went through a rites of passage. After the 10-day rites of passage, I was then elevated as a Queen Mother. I have a village there called Potome. And right now we are sponsoring young people to go to one of the private schools in one of the major cities from the village to the private school, and hopefully to move beyond. I was so glad to hear the essay winner. We had attempted to bring in some of the children from Ghana in that essay contest. Just the time got away from us. I will be going to Ghana in December, and the children are awaiting me because they do want to talk about reparations. And so I hope our next essay contest, and I'm assuming we will have more than one, right, that we possibly can have an intercultural exchange with them. But I was initiated as a Queen Mother from Ghana. I didn't do it myself.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think it's important, we're talking to young people today, that we learn about rites of passage. And because quite honestly, there's been a imposed, there's been a gap between the old and the young, or the elders and the young ones, but it's been purposely put there, And so we want to get caught up on a little bit of the history of the NCOBRA Youth Commission, which you were going to share with us today. Please help us to get caught up on a little bit of this history and a little bit about this great man, Imari Obadele.
Well, I would like to start off by honoring our ancestors. I stand on the shoulders of Queen Mother Moore, of Imari Obadele, of Njeri Agani, Dorothy Lewis, Reparations Ray. And these are some of the originators of NCOBRA. And of course, as many of you know, some of you may not know, NCOBRA, we just celebrated 30 years, which came out of the National Conference of Black Lawyers. Imari Obadele was at a conference. Sister Ajwa Aratoa was head of a workshop. And after that, the two of them got their heads together, and Baba Imari initiated NCOBRA. NCOBRA, then as of now, is a coalition of organizations and individuals whose primary purpose, our sole purpose, is to win reparations for our people. So when you look at the structure of NCOBRA, you talked earlier about the male-female national co-chairs. We also have that kind of permeates our various commissions. Our commissions are our work. One of those commissions is the Youth Commission, which of course you have been appointed as the male co-chair. When I first got into NCOBRA, well, let me go back a little further. When I first was introduced to even reparations, we were fighting to release the RNA-11, the Republic of New Africa. This is when the police stormed their headquarters in Mississippi, arrested them. Of course, Baba Obadeli was not at the home. They arrested him. They had to release him. One day later, arrested him for another chunked up charge. He ended up doing 5 years. So when I first got into the movement, Sister and Jerry and Bob Hannibal was telling me, hey, we have to fight for the RNA-11 to get them out. And eventually that did happen. And so the various commissions were put together for our work. And I'm saying all that to say that the Youth Commission, of course, was formed before I got into leadership. And it used to be pretty much populated by our college students. Brother Obadeli was a professor at Perry, A&M, and at every convention, he would bring a group of students with him. And those students pretty much populated the Youth Commission and did the work of the Youth Commission. And we are moving forward. For a couple of years, it's been kind of dormant. Leadership was, not what it should be. And so now we have great admiration and inspiration by yourself and Sister Yomi heading this Youth Commission. And I heard you say that there were numerous college students on this call. So I'm hoping that they will be also inspired. We all know that our children are our future. They are the reward of life. And young people provide the energy to push us forward. They don't create the way. That's the elders' job. But we need their energy to push us forward. I can't hear you.
Thank you, Queen Mother, for that.
Oh, okay.
We have some other giants on the line. There's so much more to be said, to unpack just that little bit that you gave us around what rites of passages are, around what the Republic of New Africa is and was. And there's a lot of depth and a lot of history that we really have to come back and draw out. So we look forward to having more conversations with our youth about this rich history and legacy that they're inheriting. And I'm telling them right now that they say, a lot of old people don't want to let go of the torch. They don't want to pass the torch. Well, I'm saying I met some that do, okay? I met some that do want to pass the torch and that are ready and that are prepared to share the knowledge, the wisdom, the experience, so that our young people can carry this torch to wherever it needs to go, whatever challenges that we face during that period of time. So thank you again, Queen Mother, for joining us as we move on with our program. That was your chance to say peace, bye, holla, see y'all later.
Oh. Asante Sana, peace and blessings. I hope to stay on for a little while because I want to hear more of the conversation. I hope young people will speak up so we can answer any questions that they may have. And I'm hoping when everything is done, again, that young people will see we need them to be involved with us. We all are getting older. And this movement, we're not done with it yet. So we still have a lot of work to do. So Asante Sana for everybody being a participant in this.
Thank you. Absolutely. Now I have my barber from SNCC on the line somewhere, and I can't seem to find him where his name is. If he's able to send me a smoke signal, send me some kind of a message here to let me know that he's on the line. I can't seem to find him. I see Baba Jamoke there raising his hand, but we are continuing with our program. We're here with the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. We just heard from presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke. We just heard from our essay contest winner there who read an amazing essay supporting reparations at a very young age, showing the strong leadership that our NCOBRA youth are displaying. And I'm looking for my Baba from SNCC, who was going to come on and be next. And I also don't see Cam, our other co-chair, on the line either. But we are steadily pushing forward. And when they reappear, they can connect with me through however they can through this Zoom. But I wanted to.
Brother, let me interrupt you just a second, because Brother Mukasa is trying to call in. He can hear us very well, but we can't seem to hear him. Is there a way you can open his mic, or could you call him direct? How can we get him in?
I don't see him on the. You said he called in, or he is.
He called in. Brother Mukasa, you still on the line? You can hang up and call back into the participant link. Okay, do that. Brother Jabbar, he's going to hang up with me now and call back in on the participant link.
Okay.
All right. Peace. Okay, do that, Baba.
All right. In the meantime, I have our one of our great elders here, Baba Jamoke, great leader for the NCOBRA, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. Like, he's been very patient and holding his hand up. I think he may have some knowledge to share with us. Baba Jamoke, did you have something that you wanted to share with us? I'm pulling you up and taking you off mute. How you there, Baba Jamoke? There you go. I see you. All right. Are you able to unmute your?
Yes.
There you go. Welcome, Baba Jamoke. Please tell us introduce yourself, please.
Sure. My name is Brother Jamoke Fetayo. I currently serve as the Southeast Regional Representative of NCOBRA. I was also the past National Male Co-Chair of NCOBRA. Really, I just kind of had my hand up earlier because you were talking and you were muted. I was trying to get your attention. That's all. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the youth and be a part of this program. This very, very important aspect of our movement in terms of passing on the torch, I like to say passing on the flame of the torch to the young people, because some elders, it's okay for them to continue to hold the torch because they're still doing great work, right? So they pass on. So I innovated a little bit. I say that the elders pass on the flame to the next generation so they can continue to have the fire to move us forward in this movement. And also want to appreciate Queen Mother Marshariki in bringing forward those ancestral names that we stand on in terms of doing this work. In addition to marking the 50th, in addition to marking the 400th anniversary of the Africans being descendants coming to this country, we also mark the 50th anniversary of something called the Black Manifesto, which is a call by James Foreman and others who voted in favor of it at a conference in Detroit to move forward the agenda of reparations through the church community and a faith-based community, and challenge them to put money into the reparations movement as a beginning step in the reparations movement. So a lot has happened over the years. There's a lot of history to talk about, but there's also much more going on right now that's so exciting. We have different states that are putting forward reparations resolutions. We have different cities that are putting forward reparations resolutions. So We could go to the history or we could go to the present, but either way, again, there's a lot going on, and we're really excited that the Youth Commission took this initiative to work on engaging our young people more in the reparations movement. Sante.
Thank you, Baba. Queen Mother had another point that she wanted to make, and I wanted to make sure she got that in. Hey there, Queen Mother.
Yes, yes, I am. I wanted to point out, we believe in operational unity and how it doesn't matter what you call yourself, as long as you believe reparations are due, we all can work together. And I wanted to point out when Baba Obadeli was in prison, John Conyers was called and he made a few calls to make sure he was all right. But Rosa Parks, the Queen Mother of the Civil Rights Movement, called the prison on a regular basis and told them to keep their hands off Obadeli. And I wanted to point that out because many times we don't understand or we create divisions among ourselves. This is not the time, brothers and sisters, to be divided. This is a time for us to come together. Again, you can call yourself whatever you want to call yourself, but those of us who are the survivors of we are all one, and we need to understand that. So I just wanted to make that point. It might be the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power movement. We are all one, and we should all lift our voices for reparations. Sante Sana.
Excellent. Thank you, Queen Mother, for sharing that. I think we have discovered our guests. Baba, can you hear us? Mic check. I think you're unmuted now. If you unmute your own phone. Are you there? 678-777. Mukasha.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, now we're cooking with gasoline. Peace and blessings.
Oh, good.
Welcome to the call.
Thank you, Brother Africa.
I'm very excited. One thing is deeply important to me is our young people, is our future. But in my studies, I've learned the significance of an organization called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. The powerful organization that produced giants such as Kwame Ture or Stokely Carmichael, you might know him by, that produced the Marion Berries, that produced the H. Rap Browns, have produced so many giants that we have on the line with us today to share some of this wisdom about youth organizing, the significance of young people and their ability to make change. So, Bob, if you want to just introduce yourself to the listeners and jump right into our role of youth and young adults in the reparations movement.
Well, thank you very much. I was in the SCNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and the biggest challenge that Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee presented was the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, the Albany Movement, and the host of other organizations that it built, and the Black Panther Party, and a host of other organizations that it built throughout its existence. One of the things that SNCC did, it built organizations in every community. And I wanted to make that point to say that each and every one of us who talking about any kind of reparation or anything, the first step is organization. We must build a worldwide organization fighting for our liberation. Liberation is something you have to fight and take, and reparation is something we have to disrupt this country and disrupt the world to demand and to take back what belongs to us in the world. And our land is Africa. It's full of diamonds, gold, oil, rubber, zinc, tea, copper, pearl. Everything is in Africa. And we take Africa back, we'll pay ourselves reparations, and we'll stop these rapists and thieves from raping and robbing and murdering Africa like they've been doing for the last 500 years. Our fight is against imperialism and the capitalistic system, and the only way we can liberate and get back what belongs to us is revolution, like they're doing in North Vietnam, in China, and other parts of the world. The first thing you want to do is to take your land back, And the same people who talking about paying us reparation are the same ones that still raping and robbing and plunging Africa and committing genocide on African people throughout the world. So I'm saying that we need revolution, and that I understand that you got a young lady, Miss Ola, is coming on air. She's a good little revolutionary, and she's working and organizing all over the world. She's a good, strong person. Her mama was kind of tough, was a strong warrior. So we have to be warriors for the liberation of our people, and we'll never be free until Africa's free. So keep demanding reparation, but you must join an organization and be part of a liberation movement. Don't just be an individual, but join an organization and work for the liberation of Africa and the liberation of our country. We want our land, Africa, back, and Africa can solve our problems.
Yeah, thank you for setting that tone for us. Tell us a little bit about how SNCC got started, a little bit about how you all went about the organizing work that you did, and if you could, kind of help us bring it up to modern day and time with these students that we have on the line, what they actually need to be doing to begin the organizing process.
Well, one of the things that brought SNCC about was the oppression of our people and they wanted liberation. So what they did, they started the sit-in movement in Greensboro, and then when the oppressor attacked our children and put them in jail, students all over the country began to spontaneously respond. And then one of the most important things, Ella Beck, including Dr. King, pulled the group together in Raleigh, North Carolina. All the met in Raleigh, North Carolina, came together, and Ella Beck informed us that we need an organization, and we formed the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And one of the things that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee created, we were organizers, not mobilizers, but organizers. And every town that we would go into, we would form a youth organization, a youth movement. We would form an organization for the elders, like Miss Heyman knows, and many others, all been a movement, Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, Sumter County movement, but there were hundreds of movements that we would create local leadership and local organization. We started the Black Panther Party in Lowndes County, Alabama, with the young people down there. We picked up guns and demanded our freedom and liberation. And one of the things that we realized that when the students went to the South, one of the main targets they went at was the students in the high school, junior high schools. And we went out there and we got with them, and they started protesting, demonstrating, and we formed organization among the youth. And at the same time, we formed schools. All y'all should have books in your hand. All you should begin to study revolution, see what a revolution is, because revolution is more than just the emotions. It's when you get organized and you can see concrete things that you're doing. One of the concrete things that SNCC did, we formed freedom schools, and where people began to express themselves, and we began to read to them and teach them how to read and tell them and let them see international things and link them up with other movements around the country. Later, it began to link with people around the world: South Africa, Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Vietnam, Palestine, and other groups. And we began to link, and by doing this, we began to people like Ho Chi Minh and Cuban president began to show us that our fight was not just against white racism, but it was we're fighting against imperialism, and this is an international movement, an international monster that's raping and robbing the world for its natural resource and raping and robbing the people for its labor. So I'm saying to all the youth, you have to get organized, and many of our youth see the need for organization. That's why they form these little groups they call gangs and what have you, but they're no different than frats and other sororities and police departments and all kind of other things out here. They gangs too. So we definitely need organization. I think our youth see the need for it, but we got to politicize our brothers and sisters out here with the so-called gangs and whatever, and let them see who the real enemy is, and begin to educate them about Pan-Africanism, begin to educate them about Africa. We need identity. We the only people who walk around here don't have a language, don't have our culture, don't have our history, and don't have no information about ourselves. So we have to begin to do that, and then by doing that, we'll make greater demands, and we have to become a threat to this society. In the 60s, we became a threat. When we started burning down these cities and going against them, every war that they fought, we was on the side of the people they were fighting against. And we became a threat here, and we forced ourselves and made ourselves stronger. But when you're just talking and don't have organization, don't have movement, and don't become a real threat to the society, then they don't basically pay you no attention. We need to let them know that we will fight anybody until they're dead, until we liberate Africa, liberate our land, liberate our territory. And we call this philosophy Pan-Africanism. And that's why we went to all the different schools. When our children went to the white schools, we went there and we formed black student unions among all the students and told them to get organized. We went there and we helped them take over schools and institutions and demand black studies and African studies, where they could learn more about the pilgrims and the white people that they were learning about in Europe, but they could learn about Africa. They could learn about Ghana, Mali, Songhai, Zimbabwe, and thousands of other kingdoms and empires and history that we had in Africa, because we recognize that just going there and learning about them people and not learning about ourselves, then you have no strength and you have no power. So one of the things that came out of SNCC was also black student unions, black studies department, and we demand organization. But the first step into doing anything is building an organization. You need a worldwide reparation movement that would include the Caribbean, that would include Africa, that would include wherever we are in the world, because many places in the world we still been started there. Our diamond, our gold, our oil, our silver is still coming out of Africa. They still dropping bombs on Libya, dropping bombs on Yemen, committing genocide on our people in the Congo, which is probably the richest land in the world, the Congo itself. They still don't want Africa to unite and become a United States of Africa. They still trying to stop the world from becoming socialist, where the workers and the peasants and the poor people would take over their labor. That's it.
Can you hear? You still there? Can anybody else hear? I will at least read one of these powerful comments from the chat. It said, "Preach, brother. Amen and Ashe. This is why Black Students of California United, BSCU, was formed, and we want to replicate it around the country, as well as Tony Browder's Cultural Imperative program, created with a Black Education Network," and it gives the website aben4ace.org. So we got lots of support around the country for just what our brother was talking about, Black student unions, Black student groups, and also Black-centered education or African-centered education. Very important points, and these are a good segue as we move on to our other co-chair, our brother Cam Howard, who's on the line with us. Peace and blessings, brother Cam. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Or can we hear you? Do you need to?
I can hear you, so I had to unmute myself, I guess. Peace and blessings, brother. How's it going?
Man, welcome to the call. We're deeply thankful here to be building with some of our youth on an NCOBRA Youth Virtual Summit. We are blessed to have some dialogue with our young people pushing forward reparations in 2019 in this documented 400th year of our enslaved status. Queen Mother Mashariki gave us a little bit of understanding earlier about why we have male and female co-chairs. Again, this being a cultural organization representing our own history, heritage, and culture. And she shared that due to having balance, meiotic principle of having balance. So we are tipping on the other side of the scale, dialoguing with our brother Cam Howard in Chicago. So welcome to the call again, brother.
Hey, thanks for having this platform, man. Thanks for putting this together.
It's a blessing.
That's our youth coordinator, youth commissioner, I should say. Both our youth commissioners. Big ups.
Yeah, shout out to Sister Abayomi. Greatly appreciate doing that great work in Alabama.
Sure.
Go ahead, brother.
No, I was just saying, I was agreeing with you about Sister Abayomi doing that work in Alabama. She's putting it down.
Give thanks, brothers, give thanks.
Plenty of it to give. So Ken, we want to jump right in. Share with us a little bit about the state of reparations. Where we're talking to young people, that haven't been around the movement for 20 and 30 years. Give us the state of where we're at. There's a bill in the House. We don't necessarily always know what a bill means, but
Right.
there's legislation that's moving through the process. And so give us a little update. I mean, there's different perspectives out there, but we know NCOBRA's been doing this work for 30 years. So just bring us up to modern day and time and where we're at in 2019 with the reparations movement.
So where we are right now is we're in a great place in the movement. We've been somewhat similar places once before, probably in early 2000. We were at a similar place where reparations was on the mainstream media. There was a lot of stalwarts in the movement being interviewed around the country. NCOBRA had a very prominent position at that particular time in the movement. So here we are, maybe almost 20 years later, at a similar, but in some ways, it's even a greater amount of interest in reparations now than it was then. And so we're in a great place. Right now, we're doing what I call it's like guerrilla warfare. We're not just fighting at the federal level. There's many states now that brothers and sisters in various state legislatures are pushing for reparations commissions. In cities now, we're pushing for legislative commissions, not just from the federal government. So it's a great time to be in the movement. We have quite a bit of scholarship, scholars meeting at various universities to deal with this issue. We know about the Georgetown 272, the 272 Africans who were sold by the Jesuits at Georgetown University in order to save the university. And we understand and we know that as a result of that, the push of the students, some of the white students have agreed to make amends by paying a little bit more on some of their fees so they can go to some type of reparative initiative for the Georgetown 272. So scholars and schools are beginning to address the issue. Certainly we haven't gotten the type of remedy or redress that we're fighting for, which is a national plan that cuts across all areas in which we've been injured. And NCOBRA, in the wisdom of some of our founders and many of our leaders of the past, they came out with what we call the 5 injury areas. And that's economic development, education, health, the criminal punishment system, and our peoplehood, our culture, our identity, which is all consumed under our peoplehood. And that we know that reparations, a complete and full reparations will deal with all injuries. And in addition, it will cover what internationally we know as full reparations. So we've advanced in our understanding of what reparations are. We're looking not only at what has taken place here in America, but we're looking at what's taking place on the international level with other organizations and people of African descent, and also even on the continent of Africa, there's some things that are taking place. We've centered this issue, we centered this fight, I should say, around the international declaration that the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, enslavement, apartheid, here in America, apartheid was called Jim Crow segregation, that all those actions were crimes against humanity. And so this reparations movement today is centered in that. And you have people of all walks of life referring to those areas as those eras, criminal eras, that the various enslaving nations and governments created engaged in these crimes against African people, crimes against humanity. And the most telling part of that, the crimes, the injuries from these crimes still exist. And so a lot of the pushback in the past struggle was that what had taken place was so far long ago, and that no one was alive who was injured, or no one was alive who enslaved anyone. And so they felt under law, American law, tort law, that this was not a issue that could be remedied legally. If anything would be done, it would be done in the courts. But now with this new understanding, this global understanding, that these were in fact criminal actions, and all crimes in any law-abiding society have to be addressed and redressed if the injury still remains. And so we have scientific data now to show that the injury still remains, that through the trauma that we've experienced, that there has been an adaptation of our genetic code. And that adaptation of our genetic code lends itself to and hypertension and all of these debilitating diseases, which could then lead to compromise the body that leads to cancer. And so you see this extraordinary amount of health crisis in our community, not only here in America, but also in the Caribbean and in South America, where our brothers and sisters went through the same crisis, the same challenges. You see this tremendous health challenges, crisis in health among people of African descent in this hemisphere. And we can scientifically state that that is because of the atrocities committed not only in enslavement, but in post-enslavement, apartheid, Jim Crow segregation here in America. And so the struggle for reparations now is on an entirely different footing than it was in the past. And it's because of the tremendous work of a lot of reparations fighters who never stopped and continue to build and build and build upon the knowledge of what had been taking place before us. And so we get to this point now where there's so much energy in the movement. And again, it's because of the work that was done in the early 1990s, when NCOBRA was founded in 1987. But in the early 1990s, when we began to bring scholarship to the issue, we began to really, in NCOBRA, really just think about how such a movement could be built and what it would take to actually bring us to healing. And moving on into the 2001 Durban World Conference Against Racism, where thousands, over 14,000 people went to Durban to deal with this whole issue of global racism, and over 400 left here in America. And again, from that conference came the whole notion that those periods of human activity were actually crimes against African people. And so we've just been continuing building to the point where we got to this point where last week, the State Department had to answer to this whole issue of reparations. And we see that this is something that they're not running from. They understand that this is something that has to take place. This is a discussion that has to take place nationally in this country. And they're against the legal, being held legally responsible, but according to their comments, they understand that this is a necessary political conversation that this country should have. And that in itself is a new, it puts us in a new context as well than the past, because we have high-level government structures who are also saying that, yeah, we understand that the disparities are a result of the atrocities committed by this government. They may not be saying it in those words, but they're stating it in fact, that they understand that there's a culpability or a level of responsibility by this government. And several months ago, you even had the Federal Reserve Chairman state that the disparities that exist in inner city communities, Black communities, is a result of the enslavement of African people. So we haven't been to this place before. So what we have to do as a reparation activist is make sure that we take advantage, to borrow a phrase from the Black Panthers, we must seize the time, and make sure that what comes out of these conversations is an actual plan for repair.
Yes, full repair. That's a subject.
Full repair. Thank you, brother. Full repair, for sure.
And so we're going to wind down. We're at 1 hour and 10 minutes here. And I want to close out with some closing words. You know, it's been a unique stage that we're at in the reparations movement. There's another group of people that have been online and driving reparations forward in a strong way. And there are some differences in opinion per se. And so as we close out and we continue to open up these dialogues to the public, and we continue to push for reparations in the broader community, what would you like to say to those as we again wind down that are a part of different strands or different parts of the reparations movement? This is to Cam and then to you, Queen Mother.
Well, first of all, I've always been under the belief that every person of African descent has the right to fight for redress. No one has full license to fight for redress for the harms that they suffer and their ancestors have suffered, and that their loved ones suffer today. So to that extent, we welcome everyone who wants to get into this fight. Having said that, there are some basic tenets to the reparations movement that NCOBRA holds, and that is that we have not been redressed until we're made whole, until we're repaired, until we're healed. And only after the healing, the repairing, and the being made whole has there been reparations. And so a lot of groups out here are looking for something much less than healing, much less than being made whole, much less than full repair. And so that's the basic difference. But we welcome anyone who wants to join this fight to push this government to redress, to join this movement.
Can't hear you.
Okay. Brother Javar?
I unmuted because we can't hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Queen Mother, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, I really like to totally agree with Brother Cam. And as I said earlier, we are a mass-based coalition. Any of our people that support reparations, we embrace. And we are hoping that the young people that are on the line can take this information back to understand that, we have in the past had to deal with divide and conquer, which has hampered our movement tremendously. We should be much smarter than that now and not let the issues of the past define who we are now. So as Brother Cam said, any of our people that support reparations, are welcome. NCOBRA is a coalition. A lot of people treat us like an organization, but it was formed to bring all the various entities of our community together so that we all could launch this fight and be a part of this fight. And we still welcome that.
Excellent. So thank you, Queen Mother, for that. Closing comments. Sister Abayomi, our other co-chair, anything you'd like to close us out with?
Well, greetings, everybody. I do want to finish what Brother Mukasa was saying. I did get him back on the line, so he got dropped. But he said, please make sure you Google his name, Mukasa Dada, because there you could read about his history and also look up the Pan-African News, because that would give us more information about the movement. I'm very happy for all of my students that came to the call this evening. Brother Jabbar, it is being recorded as well, right?
Yes, it is, and it'll be up as soon as it's done, as soon as it's done formatting.
Excellent. So all of those that were not able to come up live will be listening to it together, actually, in class, and then they can look into it individually. So just big shout out to everybody for coming in this evening, and the struggle continues.
The struggle continues. And so on behalf of the National Coalition for Blacks for Reparations in America, on behalf of the Youth Commission, on behalf of those that have suffered here in America, we thank you all for getting on. There's more work to be done. HR 40 is a bill in the House of Congress. Senate Bill 1083 is also another bill that we need to push our representatives, our elected officials to sign and push for. And so that work is a work that NCOBRA has done and continues to do, and it needs your support and help to have its final completion. And so we thank you all for getting on the line. This will be uploaded to the YouTube channel, and we look forward to talking with you soon. And very soon, you can contact NCOBRA at ncobraonline.org. That's NCOBRA online.org. And we looking forward to talking with you soon, and very soon, wishing you all peace and blessings.